Chapter 1. The Trust of the Breed. The log house near which the dog kennel stood was long and wide, with one end open, through which could be seen on either side square pens separated by a central aisle. The only other building on the property was a small cabin snuggled deeply in the shadows of the farther end of the grove. Perhaps 100 yards distant from the larger one, along the outer wall of the cabin, climbed a rudely constructed stone chimney, and from this blue-gray smoke differed lazily on the breeze. 4 windows, one in each wall, square-cut and edged with heavy wooden shutters, which swung outward, permitted sunshine to filter within the hut. The one door to this building now stood open. Leaning easily against its frame were 2 men. Both were dressed as ranchers in soft, wide-rimmed hats, boots, well-worn overalls, and heavy shirts. The taller of the 2 had a pleasant countenance, but on the face of the other a naturally sullen expression was intensified by a mouth with a wilful droop at the corners, and by eyes that were cold and lifeless. Abruptly leading the way to the kennel yard, the tall man dug into the pocket of his overalls and produced materials for a cigarette. As he dusted tobacco into the brown paper, he asked, "What do you think of them, Willis? Looks like we'll get one dog out of the bunch, eh?" He sealed the cigarette with his tongue and fumbled for a match. Willis shoved his hat back on his head. A mop of pale yellow hair fell loosely over his forehead. "Yeah, but he ain't going to be any good," came the reply in a harsh, rasping voice. "You can't get a good sheep dog out of that a lot. Take my tip and get rid of that." "No, Willis, I think you are wrong," Trent replied, as he blew forth a column of smoke. "Look at that pup. Small as he is, he's the picture of his mother, and she was the best sheepdog in Australia, and I've never yet seen one here in the States to equal her. When Strand gave her to me, he told me what she'd be like. He said I'd never have to worry about her turning killer, though the truth is, Willis, there's really no special brand of dog you can say will make a sheepdog. Shucks! I remember Bill Watson had a little bobtailed mutt over in Ranger Basin that could do anything with the band but shear 'em. And he was a mixture of everything under the sun. The whole thing depends on the dog's nature and how he is handled at first." He puffed for a minute, then walking away, turned his attention to other things. In the meantime, through the fence, Sultan and her babies watched the 2 men. That small dog mentioned was the single one of the litter who had bred true to the blood of Sultana. The mother was certainly, from the very first, this fact was evidence in different ways. He was the only male of the 4, and from the time his eyes opened, the difference between him and his sisters was startling in physical characteristics, as well as in deposition. Some unaccountable throwback in the process of nature had robbed the little females of that heritage of beauty and symmetry which distinguished their mother. This was manifested differently in each, in the dull mottled coat of one, the short, blunt muzzle of another, the floppy ears and rope-like tail of the third. All these things give the lie to purity of the strain. But this was not so with the male. The stamp of the true German Shepherd was on him, from Sultana, through whose veins surged the purest blood of generations of that shock. He had inherited the well-shaped head, small pointed ears, long sensitive nose, and gracefully molded legs. From his father, Fangs, a Mexican shepherd who had been killed by a wolf several weeks earlier, he had received a rare gentleness of deposition. This quality was not to be confused with timidly, but was rather an understanding of and a consideration for weakness, characteristics sometimes found in a brave man. His development, too, was more rapid than that of his sisters. Tumbling about in the warming rays of the sun which flooded the valley, the little pups threw and grew, pulsating to the wondrous chemistry of light and heat, thrilling in every fiber, squealing in delight at the tiny sensation of just being alive. In the beginning, the sun's brilliance dazed them uncomfortably, and the male's eyes were the first to become focused and foreseeing. Even during the preceding period of darkness, he was able to identify his sisters as well as his mother, who fed them and cuddled them protectingly to her warm side. He could tell one from the other by pressing his cool little nose along their necks or jaws. Thus did the scenes of smell and touch receive their first training, and in much the same manner was hearing development. When the mother grew weary of the pup's consistent trembling and restlessness shifting about her, the little dog soon learned from the growl vibrating in her throat that she was losing her temper, and that the danger of a quick reprimand and imminent if the youngsters had already been fed, and there was no reason for restlessness. Sultan's growl became more menacing, and when her... What's that? Sorry, I don't understand.